Hi everyone, and welcome to Search Meets Crypto Kaito's AI Knowledge Engine session. My name is Pan, Investment Manager at SCB10X, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this session today. Before we dive into our interesting discussion, please join me to welcome Yu Hu, CEO and co-founder of Kaito AI. Hi, Yu.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to be here today.
Thank you so much, you, for joining us again and as a speaker for our Redefine Tomorrow event. I'll turn to you for a brief introduction to yourself and Kaito AI.
Yep. And hello, everyone. My name is Yuhu. I'm the founder of Kaito AI. I've been in the space for roughly 3 years, and prior to that, I spent roughly 10 years in traditional finance. Most recently, I was a trader at a hedge fund. Kaito is building a info finance network, and some of the people know about Kaito through Yaps, but at the same time, also built one of the most widely used AI search engine slash intelligence platform in crypto, which is called Kaito Pro. Happy to talk about both. Happy to talk about some of the journey, and very excited to talk about, obviously some of the future stuff that we're building as well.
Awesome. To kick off our discussion, I'd like to start with your transition from TradFi, like traditional finance, to Web3 world. I realized that you spent almost a decade at Citadel before founding Kaito. What was the specific moment and realization that made you decide to leave TradFi world and build an AI search engine for crypto?
Yeah, so almost a decade in traditional finance, but roughly 5 years at Citadel, but still pretty long time there. So I guess when I was at Citadel, I was kind of for trading equities. So I was trading kind of European and US equities, learning about companies, understanding the investment thesis, and trying to capture asymmetric risk reward. I was trying to do the same on the side with crypto, so I started trading crypto, and I very quickly realized that crypto information is just all over the place, right? So you have everything is on Twitter, but at the same time, like you have to monitor like Discord, Telegram, governance forum, podcast, all that kind of stuff, and it was very, very overwhelming for me. At the same time, one thing that was very, very different for crypto versus traditional finance was in traditional finance, especially a hedge fund. One of the most common strategy is mean reversion, right? So you do whatever the analysis, you figure out the fundamental value, and then when prices are kind of diverting from the fundamental, you basically long and short the stock. And over time, obviously, will converge if the thesis is correct. But in crypto, the market is very, very retail and sentiment driven. At the same time, if you like anyone who's trying to deploy kind of a mean reversion strategy can essentially get burned very, very badly if people lose sight of the kind of the momentum side of things, right? Sentiment, momentum, and retail interest, all that kind of stuff. So at the time, I desperately needed a tool or kind of an index for me to understand, hey, like what's the mind share, what's the sentiment, what's the kind of the momentum for any particular stock or token. So that kind of formed the backbone of the reason why I started Kaito was initially trying to build a tool that was helpful and useful for myself and indexing all the kind of various different data sources, but at the same time trying to distill signal from all the noise, right? Trying to understand mindshare, trying to understand momentum, sentiment, all this kind of stuff.
Right. And compared to the tools in like TradFi, I believe that there are made like a lot of amazing tools that you can use and get your data that useful for example, like you for your trade, right? But
Yep.
for crypto, back in the day, there was none,
Yep.
almost like zero tools that you can go and search. Like even like you compare with Google or Bloomberg, right? Back then there are no data available for crypto.
Yep.
So can you walk us through what specific gaps that you identified that existing platform like Google or Bloomberg were not addressing?
Yeah. So I mean, in traditional finance, it's already kind of a highly mature and is well developed, right? So everyone would essentially, every trader would essentially have, have a Bloomberg. A lot of the people will have like Thomson Reuters or AlphaSense, or many of the other kind of different tool sets that can, cover a lot of the data sets. Really, some of the, a lot of the information that's poorly indexed by, general search engines such as Google. So stuff like if you want to find, SEC filings, if you want to find, transcript of a particular earnings, certain data set, stuff like that. It's just very, very difficult or just basically not available on Google. It was available on Bloomberg and many of the other specialized data platforms. So that was the power of these, basically, data, powerhouse and platforms. And in crypto, by the time that I was kind of trading heavily, I realized that the on-chain space is relatively well indexed. So you have a lot of the players who are basically doing on-chain analytics, portfolio tracking, fund flow, tracking, all that kind of stuff. But the informational space is very, very, very poorly indexed, right? So there's nobody tracking all the um, like all the, signals from socials, tweets, Twitter, Firecaster, Discord, Telegram is like it's so fragmented. At the same time, people are manually tracking all the governance forum proposals, votings, and every single ones are listening to all the podcasts without even having access to any transcript, stuff like that. It was very, very primitive in terms of the research process. So I knew at the time that there was a gap in terms of just in general, how do you synthesize all the information flow side of things rather than just the on-chain transaction side of things.
Right. And as you know, the theme of this year, Redefine Tomorrow, is building through cycles. It's something that we at SCB 10X admire, like founders who believe in longevity and build a long-term solution to thrive
Yep.
in this industry. And you found Kaito in 2021 and have now
Yep.
lived through like multiple crypto cycles. How has building this like through ups and downs
Yep.
influenced like your product strategy over the long term?
Yeah. I think it's like from a fundamental perspective is not a big change versus whether we're kind of in the bull market or in the bear market, in terms of like for us in particular. But I think that um, it just I think it's really about the mindset of the builders. So as you as we are, heavily focused on the fundamental, the utility and the actual adoption of the software, of the solutions that we're building, then it doesn't really matter that much in terms of whether it's kind of a very, very hype-driven bull market or kind of a mid-cycle or kind of a bear market. There's always going to be kind of a new use cases that we need to adopt, and there always going to be kind of a new challenges that we need to tackle. So simple example was that we started in early 2022, and at the time was literally, second week of we started, it was a lunar crash, and then it's the three arrows, and then it was basically FTX and all that kind of stuff. It didn't really impact us at all because we're kind of building a fundamental solution which is trying to solve the information fragmentation problem. And it's a pain point that's going to be through cycle, right? So it's not like, for example, you're building kind of for an NFT platform that all of a sudden kind of the end market has changed massively. And maybe for some of the people who are building, meme coin trading bots, stuff like that. And then, people constantly worry whether meme coins are still going to be a net cycle play, stuff like that. But for us, it's very much the same problem they're trying to solve, and the problem is kind of evergreen. And as builder, we just have to have the right mindset in terms of we're not shifting too much, we're not chasing some of the some of the hype stuff. For example, a couple of months ago, back in November, there was a huge hype in terms of just entertainment type of AI agents, right? So like people posting on X, all that kind of stuff. Our assessment at the time was this has provided not much utility. So although that we had one of the best data sets in the space, we didn't kind of carved out significant development time to essentially to be chasing some of those hypes. Instead, we basically focused on launching Yaps, which then became a much more long-lasting and enduring business that we have, right? So then, even after kind of some of the entertainment AI agent hype died down, Yaps sustained and then has been driving significant business volume for us. So these are some of the examples, and it says very much kind of to how we approach various different kind of opportunities slash distractions, how we stay true to the core problems trying to solve, how we stay true to some of the core capabilities that we have. But yeah, so that would be my take.
Right. And you mentioned about the meme driven momentum, like the narratives in crypto, right? And a lot of, entertain agent we're seeing a prediction that like AI agents will deliver true and tangible utility beyond just meme
Yep.
something that is not very highly intense in terms of utility.
Yep.
So do you believe that like Kaito will shape into the same position that you want to focus on utility and provide a solution that useful for the user in the crypto space?
Yeah, 100%. AI agents will be huge and it will be dominating, basically both internal workflow as well as external user interface. And I can't, you know, speak to all the, various different stuff that we're doing, but it's revolutionizing how things are being done internally, but also it's gonna be kind of a whole new kind of a user interface in terms of how people are interacting with information, data, actions, all that kind of stuff. So I completely see that coming. A simple example, even just kind of a building search engine back in the day, you need huge amount of user data to essentially trying to gather user data to optimize click-through rate, all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, you can do this iteratively with AI agents, right? So not every company is going to be talking about that, but it's fundamentally changing how technology is being built. At the same time, like if you think about the future of user interface and UX, nowadays you already have loads of very good performing AI agents, but still kind of at a relatively early stage, right? I would say that can do very, systematic stuff for people. And and I think that in the future it's gonna be like, all these kind of different agents that can solve very, very tangible problems, which means real utilities, right? So, one of the problems that we're kind of thinking about internally is can you build an AI agent that can basically explain all the price move for every single, token, market, token, on-chain analytics, all that kind of stuff. And stuff like this, historically, like back in the day when I was a Citadel, I was probably spend at least on a daily basis 20% of the time thinking about why such a stock is up 5% versus, another stock is down 3%. And you do a bunch of different analytics to try to understand what happened. But imagine that you just have like one AI agent that can essentially automate that process. Will be a huge unlock to kind of a real-time analytics. Just one simple example. People kind of doing all sorts of different stuff. And in the future, these things will be the norm. And then it will be kind of AI agents tapping into your personalized behaviors, and then maybe some of the, private data, stuff like that, that can really be very, very personalized. Recommending tokens, recommending actions, stuff like that. It's gonna get very, very real.
Definitely, I think like the space of the data in crypto space, there are a lot of things that you can navigate, right? And then when you have the AI agent to help you navigate on this kind of information that pretty overwhelmed, and then you have a solution like Kaito that integrate like the AI engine as well, like to help develop like the solution. It would be much easier for user to to get into the crypto and utilize the data to their benefit, right?
Yep.
And let's get into the technology, which is what makes Kaito so powerful. And you said that Google was no longer relevant for crypto information. So what makes crypto information so fundamentally different that it requires a completely specialized search approach?
Yeah. I think inherently it's very similar to kind of finance in general. It's just that the majority of the information doesn't live on um the kind of the open web, right? So if you think about what Google effectively indexes, Google indexes all the open web, but doesn't touch on any of the social media, doesn't touch on some of the semi-public information sources such as Discord, Telegram, all that kind of stuff. Majority of the like governance forums is being poorly indexed. You can rarely search anything on Google in terms of like governance proposals and transcript. Obviously, they don't have the domain knowledge in terms of understanding like which podcasts are crypto related and high quality, etc. All that kind of stuff. And obviously, Google doesn't have access to all the social media. And all of these are extremely, extremely important. But even within that, even if everyone, for example, is looking at, Twitter or, Farcaster, Discord, all that kind of stuff, there's so much going on. And it actually requires significant domain adaptation to essentially understand who is more reputable, who is less reputable, what is higher trust, as more trustworthy sources, all that kind of stuff. So that actually requires significant domain knowledge to really drill down into kind of the quality of the data, the structure of the data, all that kind of stuff. Hence why, a vertical search engine makes a perfect sense, and also vertical adaptation makes perfect sense in terms of helping people understand, what is signal, what is noise, a lot of the stuff that we started doing, right? So like smart follow-up, as an example, was because everyone can essentially bot number followers. It just makes the whole metric very, very low signal. Stuff like Yaps is also kind of a quantifying attention, quantifying, influence for every single account. And mindshare is, for example, distilling all these structurally distilling the attention of any particular project, any particular narrative, stuff like that. These are all very, very concrete examples in terms of how there are stuff that a general search engine would just never be able to do, either from a data sourcing perspective, but also from a domain knowledge perspective.
Yeah, you touch on a bit on the index data that you have to create it from like X, Discord, government forum, or even podcast, Firecaster, right? So you
Yep.
have built Kaito as a multi-platform nature for crypto. And these source of information are extremely difficult to tap into and difficult to build a product on. So when you were building Kaito from this source of data, what were the biggest technical challenges you face in, when you're building this capability?
Yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, it's obviously from the whole process perspective, you have data indexing, ingestion, pipeline, and we do everything on a real-time basis, right? So thinking about kind of a real-time database, but also, domain knowledge. At the same time, you're thinking about scalability. And scalability is a huge thing because just because of the sheer amount of data that we index on a real-time basis. We index thousands of different discords, so many, Twitter accounts, all these governance forums are completely discrete, all that kind of stuff. And then now we're kind of tapping into, TikTok, Instagram, there's a whole new domain of information that we need to tap into, unique challenges in terms of how we think about reputation. Like in crypto, on crypto Twitter, it's still relatively easy to assess reputation, right? So like who follows who, the historical track record of each of the particular account, all that kind of stuff. But then when it gets like Instagram, when it gets like TikTok, this is like order of magnitude much, much more difficult. And that presents itself with unique challenges. And at the same time, like if you think about, TikTok and some of the, video content, stuff like that, like majority of the Twitter, X content is still text-based. But when it gets like TikTok, Instagram, all this kind of stuff is like images, is, video, and it's sometimes a combination of both, right? So all that kind of stuff. So it's much more tricky than I would say kind of a text-based platform as well.
That really impressive, when uh, the way that you build Kaito and make it works. So you touched on a little bit on AI. So we just want to talk about AI and LLM a little bit. That like when it comes to LLMs, the model can hallucinate, right? And in
Mhm.
in in the fast moving crypto data that you created from many sources,
Yep.
so misinformation can be catastrophe for for user for crypto users, right? When if especially when they use the data for a signal for trading. So
Yep.
how do you ensure that your AI provides like accurate, trustworthy information and avoid these pitfalls to the user to the crypto users?
Yeah, this is really kind of a multi-layer approach. The first layer is so fundamentally, LLMs always subject to hallucination risk. Even, for example, perplexity, at times would essentially, very frequently kind of hallucinates as well. But obviously, there are various different ways this essentially, kind of not prevent it, but essentially reduce the frequency of those things from happening. One of the most important stuff is providing context, right? So instead of just like directly asking LLM for the answer, which basically means that A, it's very static based on when the LLM was trained and which would essentially determine the knowledge cutoff date. And then and which essentially means that, for example, if you ask some of the questions, then they will give you historical answers, which are basically factually just inaccurate. At the same time, you would essentially try to make up some numbers because they're basically just no context. So one of the most important techniques of reducing kind of a hallucination risk is basically providing context. And that's kind of combining a real-time search engine together with the capabilities of LLM. So there's obviously, you have a lot of the very, very mature search engine platforms or even like Grok, for example, nowadays is combining that search together with the underlying LLM to essentially provide you with an answer that you can reference, right? So they will tell you everything, and then these are the sources, etc., all that kind of stuff. So this will massively reduce the hallucination risk. Still not 100%, but it will essentially get to, relatively good state. At the same time, like it has a lot of other ways. For example, make everything kind of in a more structural way. If people are asking, if like for example, right now you're asking Grok, like what's the price of Ethereum, stuff like that. And it's almost always better if the platform indexes a structured data set. because then it doesn't rely on real-time discussions of the price, but actually you can just retrieve the price directly, right? So then, it basically comes to, multi-agent framework, then whether you can, basically structurally index a lot of the, data sets so that you know the answers for sure rather than relying on, other references and proxies. So a lot of the kind of different ways to essentially tackle that. But obviously at the same time, there's a lot of different techniques that you can use in terms of so cross-checking and prompting, all that kind of stuff to essentially reduce the risk of hallucination.
Right. And so when it comes to crypto, we touched on a little bit on hallucination on AI part, which is kind of concerning a little bit, and is related to the next discussion that I want to talk about is the security.
Yep.
So the security is absolutely the main priority and concern for the user, right?
Yep.
And in March, both of your personal and company social media accounts were compromised,
Yep.
and in what you call a sophisticated social engineering attack. Can you share a little bit on detail on this incident and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so we've done a fair amount of investigation into it. It was actually so what happened was so both of my account and the company account were basically tweeting out something uh without us authorizing the tweet. But actually the account was never kind of logged in by any other person. We also had cold wallet 2FA enabled, and there was no new active session. There's no new device that ever logged in to either my account or the company account. So which leaves, basically some of the people are suspecting, maybe it's from the platform itself, stuff like that. We don't know. Like there's never going to be any answer, provided there. But we've seen time and time again, it was like, Hyperliquid, for example, got hacked actually two times. One time was kind of the labs the main account. The other time was the foundation account. The DB, kind of a tier 10k Twitter account, was basically the biggest news account, was also hacked. And it was kind of the exact same thing as what we went through. Basically, they had cold wallet, 2FA, and stuff like that. And both times actually it was the same wallet that front ran the trade. So in our case, there was a particular wallet that was actually linked to the tier 10k hack. They basically received the funds from that and then open a massive short on Kaito, on Hyperliquid right before kind of the compromised tweet, and obviously profited from market panic. And we've seen more and more of these happening, and whether it's good or bad, but nowadays, you can basically open very, very sizable positions on Hyperliquid on these things, which also enabled people directly profiting in a very anonymized way. And so there has been kind of acceleration in terms of, all these kind of different hacks and you know stuff happening. There's a ton of kind of Telegram hacks that people sending fake Zoom links. Some of my friends even fell victim of those attacks and stuff like that. And I think it's only accelerating in terms of that trend. And I think that security is hugely important in our space because in a decentralized network, and obviously, if something happens on Ethereum, then there's no way to essentially revert to it, right? So, money lost is money lost. And this is asymmetric reward for the hackers to essentially do, some of the bad things. And I think that as an industry, we need to continue to be placing huge emphasis on stuff like this and then collectively, figure out solutions and enhance some of the security measures.
And how has you incorporate that incident to your platform security? Have you changed any security in terms of the infrastructure behind the Kaito AI platform?
Yeah, so we do a lot of those. We work with a lot of the white hats you know in terms of enhancing the security of the platform, obviously doing regular audits, and you know anything that basically alerts us from any security vulnerability that we place, you know, the highest kind of priority. So it remains to be, you know, one of the most important things. And, you know, there's a lot of the stuff we're always being, you know, doing, you know, at the highest standard, right? So for example, um we did a full Discord audit, right? Very few people actually do that, but we essentially do a full Discord audit, not just kind of me, but actually every single team member would essentially have 2FA for, you know, Telegram, 2FA for that, you know, Twitter account, and all the kind of associated social media accounts. So we, you know, and I think that in the space, because the stakes are very high, right? So, you know, any, you know, compromised tweet can essentially generate so much influence. These things have to be taken into account in a very serious way.
Good to hear that you know like we kind of ensure that we have more security from the Kaito and user can be more reliable to
Yep.
the platform. And now I want to shift our focus to the future and your long-term vision. So Kaito token launched on a lot of mainstream exchanges in February, and you describe it as a foundation of an AI-driven info finance network. So this coin, like the term of the info finance, can you explain what does it mean and how tokenization enhance your search platform?
Yeah. So tokenization has two major benefits in our particular case. So first things first, if I share some of the, you know, stats of the Yaps platform, it becomes relatively clear. So overall, we have roughly 1 million of registered users, but people, if you count the number of accounts that have ever gained any Yaps, is only around 20 to 30,000, which is roughly 2 to 3% of the entire network. As a matter of fact, the majority of the users are not content creators. Majority of the users are content consumers. If you build an info network that only benefits content creators, then you're basically benefiting a very, very small minority of the group. But actually, in our thesis, info network should be basically benefiting every market participant. And a lot of that has to be the actual users, the actual content consumers. And the tokenization can essentially much broaden the platform reach from just rewarding the top content creators to actually every single one of the users who are holding the Kaito token. That's number one. So people will essentially have a much more decentralized, a much kind of a broader distribution in terms of the beneficiaries. Number two is the actual usage of the token. So a lot of the stuff that we're currently doing is providing you know, basically utility to the token, but also designing some of the mechanism that can actually use the token to essentially power some of the InfoFi thesis. As one of the examples, you know, one of the newer mechanism that, you know, basically we're thinking is um, people are basically pledging the tokens to various different kind of a reward pools, right? And so through the market mechanism, you can actually see which reward pool is more popular. And then you can calculate the market cap of the reward pool. You can basically, you know, using a market mechanism to essentially, you know, direct our incentives. We don't have to make our, you know, our decisions ourselves. to essentially decide, hey, like which reward pool is better, which reward pool is kind of less popular. We can essentially leverage the market dynamics, and that market dynamic is basically supported by utility and the usage of the token, stuff like that. These things just weren't available before we launched the token, and nowadays with the token out, we can essentially design, loads of interesting and innovative kind of a mechanism to essentially utilize it.
Right. I think that creating a new, you know, token economy and info finance that people can get access to and, create a pool that um, provide the incentive on the providing the data and get the insight of the data. That's a fascinating concept, and I kind of believe that the industry can move forward on that direction, that people can be part of the information providing insights.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think I want to bring in the investor perspective. So Kaito had raised 10 million, right? And the valuation is around 90 million.
Yep.
So I think this is like reflect on your long-term vision that, people trust in Kaito, and they put a lot of, trust and investment into the Kaito. So, but the recent research suggests that, in the broader market, AI effort is like taking precedent over the Web3 kind of momentum on the investment landscape. And as a founder building at the nexus of both, like AI and Web3, how do you position Kaito and the value proposition to the investment community in this landscape?
Yeah, and it's a good question. When we first started, we were kind of an AI company, but back in the day, nobody AI wasn't a buzzword. Actually, one of the reasons why Kaito is called Kaito is because it has AI in that. But like back in the day, like in our first pitch deck, nobody really cared whether it was AI company. It was like early 2022, and only later that year, ChatGPT obviously got launched. Then all of a sudden, people were like massively hyping up or the AI stuff. And then when we kind of raised the second round, then a lot of the discussion were kind of focused on how scalable, like what utility and what's the kind of a real AI tech that's in that. And I think that nowadays we position or we think about narrative less because it's already kind of a public company and it has like a working product, it has real revenues, it has real users. We're much more focused on solving real problems that we're facing, as opposed to kind of just shaping uh, the narrative and position ourselves in front of a kind of an investor community. But that being said, we do talk to kind of liquid investors very frequently, and there needs to be kind of a coherent and attractive uh, sort of a long-term story that is at play there. And that is what we believe, uh, kind of the InfoFi network, right? So, and I think that it's still a very, very new and nascent concept. Not many people have done a ton of work trying to understand what it really entails. And very few people, for example, will be associating Polymarket with InfoFi, but actually they were the pioneer. And I think Vitalik, for example, wrote a main piece on that. First, coining the word of information finance, and it was basically, once you financialize the information, it provides a signal, and that is probably the closest source of truth, as opposed to kind of doing any sort of pools and stuff. And I think that a lot of the stuff that we're going to be building down the line would essentially also be doing that, right? So we talked about kind of three major pillars, and one of them is kind of similar to the concept of information, financialized information providing the closest source of truth, which is going to be tied to a new product that we're going to be launching, a new mechanism that we're going to be launching in Q3. But, you know, and I think that once people spend more time trying to understand what the concept and the fundamental layers of InfoFi, that over time there's going to be a lot more adoption, a lot more innovations that happen across the space. We're actually already seeing a lot of that. And there's also kind of a common misconception in terms of what InfoFi really is. Some people just thinking that okay, InfoFi is like um, you know, incentivizing information, which is not always the case. And some people associate InfoFi with noise, which is actually the complete opposite. And but I think that we're opening up completely new primitives, right? So think about, in the future, people can trade trends, people can trade the popularity of a particular singer, sentiment of a president, stuff like that. It really kind of opens up new primitives in terms of how we interact with information, how information is being monetized, how content and engagement even is being monetized within the attention economy. So those are some of the stuff that's very, very exciting.
That definitely very, very exciting, and we're in a very good time to explore and see how things develop in the AI and crypto space, especially in the info finance. I think like the value from the data it's going to be much like very variable, and you can monetize on that, like as you mentioned. I think that's something that I personally I like to see how it goes from here in 2 or 3 years from now, and I'm
Yep.
rooting to for the crypto space and info finance space to grow a lot more from this.
Yep.
And at the beginning, you mentioned on Kaito Pro. Can you give us a little bit on context? What is Kaito Pro and how many teams have you been support and the pricing
Yep.
that you offer to the users?
Yes, I mean, Kaito Pro has been uh, basically adopted and used by a majority of the crypto teams, and basically kind of a few different categories. One is project teams who are using Kaito Pro to essentially track the mindshare of a particular project, sentiment of a particular project, running, basically doing strategic analysis on competitors, just, major narratives in the space, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of a one category. Another category is all the funds, liquid funds and VCs. A lot of the people can kind of been using Kaito Pro. And and these kind of two are the kind of the major categories. Obviously, there's individual traders, there are other marketing firms and stuff like that, or regulators, governments, for example, kind of using Capital Pro. But those are kind of the smaller subset. And so currently we have roughly 700 different teams using that, and people paying either kind of a monthly fee or annual fee. And that's kind of the state of Kaito Pro. And we also provide some of the API solutions to either project teams and some of the other developers to essentially tap into some of the data solutions that we have across all the social platforms and governance forums and sentiment index, all that kind of stuff.
And given that you offer the subscription model for users to subscribe and get into the data, access to the data, how do you balance like the democratizing access to the crypto information with the building a sustainable business model?
Yeah. It's very important. I think that it's about segmentation. So Kaito Pro is specifically targeting the professional and premium users in the space. So it doesn't really have like a free plan, doesn't really have like an entry level tiering. So that's very different. So people are essentially paying 10,000 US dollar a year to essentially access the product. But at the same time, we have Kaito Yaps. which is completely free to use, tackling a completely different, segment of the market and solutions as well, right? So it's like, tokenizing, quantifying attention for, various different kind of, mindshare metrics, pre-TG arena, all that kind of stuff. So the two products are completely isolated from each other. And in fact, that even for Kaito Pro, if you allow kind of a retail participant to essentially use Kaito Pro, they will be finding that very, very overwhelming. And, majority of the people just aren't familiar enough or aren't willing to spend enough time knowing about a tool that is for professional use. Majority of the people want insights instantly. They want to be tracking stuff in a much more just straightforward way, right? So I want to see, hey, the mindshare of this particular account, whether that's higher, lower, all that kind of stuff. So that's how we segment both, and that's how we ensure that we have both sustainability, which is the revenue generating side of the business, but also has the distribution and a lot of the kind of newer stuff that we're doing.
All right. I think our time comes down to the very end of the session. So don't forget to check out Kaito AI and Kaito Yaps. So thank you so much, you, for coming and
Thank you
joining
for
us for
having
the
me.
session. Hopefully we see each other next year.
Yep, sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.